Okay, we're back in my office and Yuli's picture is done. So I take it out and I inspect it. Hello, Lexi. I inspect it to see if there's any threads that need to be cut. And as you can see, it's kind of a mess on the back. Some of these threads around the side I'll cut. And I also have my trusty sweater trimmer that I use to smooth out, get rid of some of the threads. You won't be able to see this, but pulling some of these long threads like this one that goes way across will just help make it more flexible. So now I have to pull out the basting stitch that goes around and then cut this and get it ready for making the pillow. Now that I've picked out all the basting threads, I have to iron it a bit because it's got quite an indent from the hoop. So I'm going to press this as smooth as I can. And then I'm going to start slicing it up to get it to a nice square size. And then I'll cut the pillow fabric. And since Yuli was a military dog, he will get camo. I have a bunch of fleece camo that I'll be chopping up, and this is nice and soft and it'll be the pillow. I think I'm going to have to find some soft blue. I'd been using blue fabric, but I think the fleece is really nice and soft. So I'll have to do the police dogs in something like this too. So I'm going to square this off and get ready to cut it. This is my rotary blade, my ruler. Line this up a little bit and measure maybe about 2 inches. Here. This is a self-sealing cutting board. So I can take that off easily. Line it up this way. And I won't bore you with this now. Go through and measure this off and get a nice even square of his face. Okay, since my embroidery machine worked so hard yesterday, by the way, I started this at 3 in the afternoon yesterday on Saturday, and it finished at 11:30 at night. So it does take quite a long time to stitch out. And I did have about 12 thread breaks, mostly because I have some Chinese thread that I purchased on Amazon. It breaks a lot. I didn't know it was from China until after I bought it. Now, this is my other machine, my Sapphire, Viking Sapphire, which I also love. Since my embroidery machine worked so hard, I'm going to let that rest, switch over to my Sapphire to do the pillow. Because this is satin, it easily frays. So I'm going to put an overcast stitch in white on this start it. Make sure the needle stays in it so I can turn the corner. And run it all the way around. That didn't hold. Okay, now that I can trim a little bit around there, but that'll hold the ends from unraveling while I'm sewing on the ribbon or having little white ends sticking out under the red ribbon, which is no big deal, but would look a little tacky. So I try to make it as nice looking as possible. Trim a few more here, and then it's time to cut and start getting it ready for the camo. Okay, now that I've got that done, I've got my camo laid out here. And don't do it real precise. Just kind of give this a good eye. Smooth it out. That should do it. Now I need to give this a little light press just because it gets some lines in it from being folded in the closet. So I'll give this a little press. Not much because fleece is soft and it's a pile, so you don't want to mat it down too much. But a little light ironing will get rid of any goofy creases, which I have a few here. I buy a lot of this camo when it's on sale because it's what I also use for my hero blankets for deployed. And then I have a patriotic fleece that I use for the final salute blankets for veterans who have passed. So, now I just have to square this and it's folded right now. I don't want to work with a fold, so I'm going to slice off just this really close edge to make it 2 pieces, because working with a fold will give you the freedom to move it around if you need to. Make sure that I have the right sides. They're almost the same, but one is a little nicer looking. I think the out of focus side actually looks a little nicer. It's a little softer on that side. So I figure out which is going to be the front. That'll be like that. And then I start pinning it into place. Take that one off. And I'll pin it all the way around, and then I sew it onto this, and then I'll put a ribbon around it. Okay, I have this all pinned. Now I'm going to run just a straight stitch along the bottom. Where are my pins? All my pin cushions are downstairs. The good ones anyways. Okay. Ow. This is stretchy, so I have to be careful not to pull it too much, or it'll crimp up. Ow. Sewing can be painful. Reverse to tack it in. Cut. Now it's on there, but because it's only sewn around the outside, this is kind of floppy, and I want to tack it down better. But I don't want to just put stitching anywhere, so what I do is I tell it that I want to do free-form sewing, so the feed dogs get knocked down so it's not pulling. And now, like darning, I can move this any way I want. And this is real tricky, so I have to go slow. And I just carefully go around the image. Now the sewing machine isn't pulling it. I can move this any way I want, so I have to be really careful to keep it in line. And luckily I've had a fair amount of experience doing this with some custom lettering that I did before I had an embroidery machine. I would write a word out in Microsoft Word and then stitch over the lettering, rip off the paper, and then do a satin zigzag around it to do custom lettering. So now I have it stitched around here and also around the basic image. Now I need to put a ribbon, and I need to change this into red because somewhere around here I have this pretty red ribbon that I bought cheap at some point, a couple of bucks for 2 rolls of these. I didn't know what I'd use it for, but I figured eventually I'd have something good to use it for. I've used a little bit on various projects, but now it works out great hiding the seam from where this is sewn on, and it makes it look pretty with a nice red ribbon around it. Okay, so I have this burgundy colored thread in here. Leave a little tail so that I can work in when it ends, and we do a zigzag a little wider. Okay, very sadly my camera battery died just as I was starting to do the ribbon. It's my machine starting up. So you didn't get to see much of the process. I sew around, and then I use on the corner, this is all one piece, on the corner I do a little trick that you do in binding quilts. You fold the fabric back and then bring it down again, so it makes a nice little corner, and then you sew it down. So it makes these nice little squared corners. And there it is, all sewn up. Now I turn them, the right sides together, and I always start at the bottom, or I try to remember to start at the bottom. So that's where the threads come together, and I've switched my machine to green thread now. And I'm going to line these up, which is a lot of fun to try to do with fleece because it sticks to itself. I think we got it. And we go back to my tight zigzag. Get out of there. And I'm starting in the middle because I'm going to leave this section back here open to stuff it. Sometimes you have to lift this up and start again to get that fleece under there. I often have a walking foot, which is one of my favorites looks like this, and it has feed dogs on the top too, so that when this goes up and down, the feed dogs on the top pull from the top and the ones on the machine pull from the bottom, so that fabrics like this will stay nice and smooth. But I'm being a little lazy and don't want to keep switching, and I can't use the walking foot on the satin because it'll leave marks. So I would have had to change it, and I'm being lazy. Okay, it's all sewn except for this little pocket. Now I have to turn this inside out without tearing it, which is tricky because it's stiff from all those threads. And poke the corners out. And we're almost there. Push the seam out a little bit. Okay, now I stuff it. So we're back over at the table, and it's looking pretty nice. I just have to get my big bag of stuffing. This is some poly stuffing. And for the next few minutes, I sit and stuff this into the corners. It gets a little lumpy, but for time, with lots of hugs, it'll flatten out better. I try to do my best to get it as unlumpy as possible. And I actually feel guilty when I have to bang on the pillow a little bit. I don't want to hurt the poor doggy faces. But I need to make sure that these lumps come out and that it looks as even as possible. Jam it in there. So I'll stop the video and show you when I've got this stuffed up. Alrighty, the final step, and it's one of the hardest because I now have this end with the stuffing attempting to come out. And I have to smush it in and try to sew that. I start with a straight stitch just because it's the easiest. I need to fold this and wrestle the pillow into position, which is not easy, believe me. Alright, ouch. this is, see, I told you, sewing is painful. And this is where I have to pull it a little, because I have to keep it stretched. Put a little locking stitch there, and cut it. And then I move to a zigzag, and I do the whole line, so that I'm sure I've got it, and so I don't have this little ripple just here, it'll come all the way down. But I sewed this before, because otherwise it's a nightmare to do the whole thing. It's hard enough just that little bit. So, this is quite a wrestling match. In fact, I forgot to stretch that stitch out a little bit. Try to reach around to grab it so I can pull it through a little bit. And there we have it. I have to fluff up the bottom a little, shake it, and there it is, finished. It'll work in, there's a little gap there. I'll work it in. I'm sorry, Yuli. I don't mean to squish you around. Eventual hugs will smooth it out. And hopefully hugging the pillow will help people, his family, and the others who have received one of these get over the grief of losing their wonderful dog. I know that pain. And that's it.